Consumer that's looking to do things like e-commerce, to use social networks, to take part in the internet the same way anybody else was, they're not very satisfied. And in addition to the speed, it's also what they're paying for, because their speed is slower on average than the US and Japan, and they're paying almost double as what the US consumers and Japanese consumers pay. So quite frankly, they're paying more and getting less. So if you think about it even from an economic perspective, mobile commerce, or Chinese consumers using their mobile phones to purchase goods, they're spending about $50 billion per year online. And just to think, if they actually had faster, more reliable internet, those numbers could be explosive.
There has been a technological leap as well, right? We don't have to rely on broadband, because you look at 4G and 5G now that's being deployed around the world. It's as fast, if not faster, than the fastest DSL was just a few years ago. You don't have to go and lay expensive pipe. You don't have to build an expensive infrastructure. Couldn't China use sort of that roadmap to forego some of the pains that many other countries went through to lay fiber down railroad tracks like we did in the US, that ultimately, I mean, it was nice to have, but my gosh, that costs a lot of money and time?
They definitely can, and they definitely will. I mean, Li Keqiang said, I think just last week, that China wants by 2017 to achieve 100% internet penetration. So that's not just on broadband, but it's also mobile. If you're looking at broadband access and why it's still going to be important over time, is a lot of these big initiatives that the Chinese government's putting in place. You have a massive China urbanization plan that's going to be live by 2020. You have the One Belt, One Road initiative to essentially build out the western part of the provinces and then ultimately into Western nations in the Middle East. So broadband is crucial, being able to facilitate business and other interactions.
It's connecting everybody together. As it is in many parts of the world, the urban areas have high-speed internet, and it's quite easy to access. And then once you get further away, it gets a little slower, not just because you're further away, but from distance-wise, but also because infrastructure builders say, well, you know, big town, small town, of course I'm going to go build the infrastructure for the big cities first. So they also get delayed, they get discriminated against because they're small towns too. How does China remedy that?
I think you're right. I mean, naturally, it's always going to start at the urban centers. And you see this not just in China, but in other emerging markets. And that's why the rural areas, or even markets outside in more or less developed countries, like if you're looking at Latin America, if you're looking at markets in sub-Saharan Africa, the mobile devices are typically the ones that are going online first, and they're the ones that are the primary channel for consumers to access the internet. I think China, they know they need to have a more balanced economy, not just in terms of the telecom sector, but just in general.
You know what was interesting in some of the research was that you know, there are speed tests done around the world. I mean, you know which ones I'm referring to. Singapore and Hong Kong and Japan rank on the top, as well as South Korea as well. And it is fascinating. I mean, I can see why Singapore and Hong Kong would rank high, because the cities are relatively small and it's easy. But at the same time, I don't want to assume anything either. Why is it that there are certain places that have significantly faster speeds than the rest of the world? What is it that makes them unique in that sense? What's their advantage?
I think number one, I think you hit it on the head, is its size. I think if you look at a market like Singapore or Taiwan or Hong Kong or Japan, these are much smaller markets than China. Japan, Korea, obviously slightly larger, but at the same time, they've had a focus on developing their telecom industries for many more years than China did. So you have a situation right now where China has more mobile users, more internet users than anywhere else in the world. But the penetration is still relatively low, so there's a lot of room to grow, and consumers are going to start demanding more than previously before.